If you are reading this letter, it means I am already gone. This isn't an explanation, nor a plea for forgiveness. This is my confession. This is the truth that has been eating away at me for longer than I care to admit. This is the end of something I once thought was unbreakable. My name is Daniel Carter. I was a husband, a father, a man who thought he had it all. For 20 years, I believed that my life was as perfect as it could be. I had a beautiful wife, Lauren, and a daughter, Emma. I had a career, a home, and everything that most people dream of. We were that family, the one that everyone envied. But that illusion, my perfect life, was shattered by one simple truth. I was wrong. And now I'm left to pick up the pieces, knowing that the person who was once my everything is gone. Lauren was everything to me. We built a life together, step by step, year after year. I thought I knew her better than anyone else. But in the end, I didn't know her at all. Or maybe she didn't know herself. Maybe in the end, we were both lost. This letter is the truth, my truth, and for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid to speak it. We met when we were young, just out of college. I was 23, freshly graduated, and still figuring out who I was. Lauren was everything I wasn't. She was confident, radiant, and so full of life that I sometimes wondered if I was dreaming. It wasn't love at first sight, not for me at least, but it was something I'd never experienced before. She was the kind of woman who made everyone in the room look at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't mind being in the background. When she noticed me, it was like the whole world shifted. There was no mistaking it. Her eyes locked onto mine, and she smiled, walking toward me with a purpose. "Daniel, right?" she asked, her voice like music. "Yeah," I replied, my heart racing for reasons I couldn't explain. "That's me." She laughed lightly, a sound that made me feel more alive than I'd ever felt before. "I'm Lauren. We should talk," she said. And that was it. From that moment on, we were inseparable. Our relationship was everything I could have ever dreamed of. We spent months getting to know each other, sharing our hopes, our fears, and our dreams. She was different than anyone I'd ever met. Independent, driven, yet incredibly caring. She pushed me to be a better man, a better version of myself, and I loved her for it. It didn't take long before we moved in together. We found a small apartment on the edge of the city, a place that felt like home from the moment we stepped inside. We weren't wealthy, but we had everything we needed. Each other, love, and the hope that things would always get better. Lauren and I had talked about getting married from the beginning. We both knew it was inevitable, so after 2 years of being together, I asked her. She said yes. Our wedding was beautiful, intimate. It wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect in every way. I thought I was the luckiest man alive. After the wedding, everything seemed to fall into place. We bought a house, we found good jobs, we made plans for the future, plans that I thought would last forever. And then Emma came along. She was the light of our lives, our reason for waking up every day, for working harder, for loving deeper. Lauren was everything I had ever wanted in a mother. She was gentle, kind, and fiercely protective of Emma. But I never saw the cracks. I didn't notice them at first. It started so small, so insignificant that I didn't even realize it was happening. Lauren began coming home later from work, sometimes an hour, sometimes 2. She'd say it was just a late meeting or a work deadline, and I believed her. She had always been a dedicated professional. She was ambitious, driven, and I admired her for it. But something started to change. Her tone became sharper, her patience thinner. When we would talk, it felt like she wasn't really there. She would nod, smile, even laugh, but it wasn't the same. Her eyes were distant. The woman who once shared everything with me, the smallest details, the things that made her laugh, the things that made her cry, was now shutting down. I remember the first time I felt it, truly felt it. We were sitting in the living room watching a movie together. I had reached for her hand, but she pulled away. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I felt the distance, the coldness, as if a wall had been erected between us. The next few weeks were filled with little signs. Lauren would come home late, her eyes red, as if she had been crying. She became increasingly withdrawn, not sharing anything about her day, not asking about mine. At first, I thought it was stress. Work had been difficult for her, she said. But I thought something inside me told me that wasn't the whole story. One night, when she went to bed early, I couldn't sleep. I was lying next to her, but she was already sound asleep. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I got up and walked around the house. I found myself in the study, staring at the computer screen. Without thinking, I opened her email. The moment I did, I knew I had made a mistake, but it was too late. There, in black and white, were emails between Lauren and a man named Greg, a man I didn't know, someone she had never mentioned before. The words were innocent at first, work, casual, but then the tone shifted. I miss you. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible. You make me feel alive. I'm thinking about you. I can't stop. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened and my head spun. I felt the world tilt beneath me. I sat down, my hands trembling, staring at the screen, the words mocking me. The trust I had in Lauren, in our marriage, was shattering before my eyes. When Lauren came home the next day, I said nothing. I couldn't bring myself to speak. The words felt like they would choke me if I tried. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't look at her without seeing the lies. Daniel? She asked softly, as if nothing was wrong. But I couldn't pretend. I couldn't ignore it. What's going on? I didn't say a word. I walked over to where her phone was charging on the kitchen counter and picked it up. The screen lit up with another message from Greg. I turned to her and handed her the phone. Explain this, I said, my voice tight with the words I had been holding back for so long. Her face went pale as she read the message, her breath catching in her throat. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with guilt and shame. Daniel, she began, but I didn't want to hear it. How long, Lauren? I demanded. How long has this been going on? 6 months, she said quietly, barely able to look at me. I never meant for it to happen. I was lonely. I was so tired, and he was there. It was a mistake. A mistake. 6 months of lies, of secret meetings, of stolen moments. A mistake. I asked, my voice breaking. Why him? Why not me? I don't know, she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. I just wanted to feel something again. I don't remember the rest of that night. It's all a blur of anger, pain, and disbelief. We didn't talk much after that. I couldn't. How could I? Lauren cried. She begged for forgiveness. She promised she would end things with Greg and make things right. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. I couldn't erase the images of them together, the lies she had told, the trust she had broken. I moved out. I wasn't a dramatic exit. There were no shouts or accusations, just a quiet realization that there was nothing left for me here. I couldn't live with her anymore. I couldn't pretend to be happy. I told Lauren that I was leaving. She didn't stop me. She didn't beg me to stay. She understood in that moment that it was over. It's strange, the feeling of walking through your own life as though you're just a ghost in the background. When I left, I thought the hardest part would be confronting Lauren, but no, the hardest part was realizing how much I'd lost and how little of myself was left. I found a small apartment far from the home we'd shared. It wasn't much, one bedroom, a small kitchen, and a view of a street that was always too busy for my liking. But it was mine, and for a while, that was enough. It was a place to breathe, to be alone, to figure out how to live in this new reality where everything I'd thought I knew had been pulled out from under me. I tried to keep things normal for Emma. I didn't want her to feel the weight of this, not yet. She was still so young, too young to understand that her parents' marriage had crumbled. So I pretended. I pretended to be okay when I wasn't. I smiled when she asked how I was doing, and I said, "I'm fine," though I was far from it. Lauren and I kept the conversations to a minimum. There were a few awkward exchanges over the phone when she called to talk to Emma, and once or twice we met to discuss arrangements, when she would pick Emma up, when I could see her next. But the tension between us was unbearable. Even though we were no longer living together, it felt like we were still trapped in a relationship defined by lies. And those lies, they haunted me. It was like an invisible chain wrapped around my chest, suffocating me with each passing day. Lauren had apologized 1,000 times, begged for my forgiveness, but the damage was done. How could I ever forgive her for what she had done? For taking the most sacred part of our marriage and handing it over to someone else? The first few weeks after I left, I was numb. I went through the motions: work, dinner, sleep, repeat. But nothing mattered. I felt like I was walking through a fog. Even Emma's face, the one thing that used to brighten my entire world, now felt distant. She was still my daughter, and I still loved her with all my heart, but the pain of the betrayal had cast a shadow over everything. I started to notice the small changes in myself. The man I had been, optimistic, strong, committed, was gone. The world around me felt colder. My mind would drift back to those emails, the words between Lauren and Greg, and I could almost hear her voice telling me that she missed him. At night, when the silence became unbearable, I would close my eyes and replay the events in my mind. The first moment I found the email, the confrontation with Lauren, the tearful apologies. It was like I couldn't escape it. It was there, lingering in every thought, in every breath I took. I tried to talk to friends, but it was difficult. How do you explain something like this to someone who's never been in your shoes? People were sympathetic, of course, but I could tell that they didn't really understand. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was something deeper. It was the erosion of trust, of everything I had built with Lauren. It was the nights that got to me, the quiet, the darkness. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city outside, but all I could hear was the echo of Lauren's voice. It was a mistake. I'm so sorry. I tried to shut it out, tried to sleep, but it was impossible. I started drinking more. At first, just a glass of wine at dinner, then a bottle. Then I began going out, to bars, anywhere to avoid being alone with my thoughts. I convinced myself it was just part of the process, the healing process, I told myself. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was my way of running away from the reality I didn't want to face. One night, I went to a bar I'd never been to before. It was dark, quiet, a place where people went to forget. I sat at the counter, nursing a drink, staring into the amber liquid as if I could drown my thoughts in it. The bartender, a guy who seemed to be around my age, noticed me and struck up a conversation. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," he said, leaning against the counter. "Everything okay?" I stared at my drink, then looked up at him. "Yeah," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Just tired. "Tired of what?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his eyes. I sighed, setting my glass down. I didn't know this man, and for some reason I felt like I could tell him anything. "Tired of pretending everything's fine?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded. Yeah, I get that. You want to talk about it? I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Maybe it was the drink. Maybe it was just the need to talk to someone who wasn't connected to the mess I had made of my life. Maybe it was just the need for a release. I caught my wife cheating, I said, the words coming out raw and unfiltered. 6 months. She was seeing someone else, and I didn't even know. The bartender didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at me, like he was letting the words sink in. Then he spoke softly. That's a hell of a thing. But you'll get through it, man. You just gotta keep going. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed him. Days passed, and things didn't get any better. I couldn't get Lauren out of my mind, no matter how hard I tried. Even though I had left, even though I had moved out, I still felt tethered to her, to the life we had shared. And I knew it wasn't healthy, but it was impossible to stop. Then, one day, something happened that I didn't expect. I ran into Lauren at the grocery store. I didn't want to see her, didn't want to have any kind of conversation, but there she was. She looked tired, worn down, and I hated myself for still caring, but there was something in her eyes, something broken, that made me stop. Daniel, she said quietly, her voice trembling, I need to talk to you. I didn't want to. I didn't want to hear any more apologies. But something made me stay. Something in the way she looked at me. What? I asked, my voice flat, tired. What's there left to say? I never wanted this, she said, her voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt you. I was lost. I was selfish. The words were hollow, and I could see the tears in her eyes. For a moment, I almost felt the familiar pull, the love that had once connected us. But then I remembered the betrayal. I remembered how she had turned away from me when I had needed her the most. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Lauren, I said, the words coming out with more pain than I expected. You took something from me that I can never get back. She nodded, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I know, I need you to know how sorry I am. There it was again, the apology, the words that meant nothing now. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending to be okay, to be fine with what had happened. The weight of betrayal was too much to bear, and I knew it was time for me to leave it all behind. I told Lauren I was leaving, again. This time, it wasn't just about moving out. It was about moving on. It was about taking back my life, even if I didn't know what that meant anymore. Lauren didn't try to stop me. She didn't beg me to stay. Maybe deep down, she knew it was over. Maybe she'd known all along. The days that followed were difficult. I was alone, truly alone, for the first time in years. I tried to fill the emptiness with work, with distractions, but nothing seemed to work. I missed Emma more than anything, and I realized that she was the only thing that kept me going. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know how to fix everything, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay in the past. I couldn't keep dragging around the weight of a life that no longer existed. So I took a step forward. I started living again, one day at a time. I'm not saying I've forgiven Lauren. I don't know if I ever will, but I've forgiven myself. And that, for now, is enough. The silence in the apartment was deafening at first. After Lauren and I parted ways for the final time, I thought that the hardest part would be leaving her. But in truth, the hardest part was learning how to live without the life I had known for so long. We had built everything together, a home, a family, a shared future, and now all of that was gone. The first few days after I left were spent in a haze. I would wake up, the sun streaming through the window, and for a few seconds I would forget everything. I would reach for my phone, then remember. I would walk into the kitchen, and for just a moment I would wonder why Lauren wasn't there. Then it would all come crashing back. I didn't know what to do with myself. I spent hours wandering the city, just walking without a destination, trying to escape the feeling of emptiness that seemed to follow me everywhere. My mind would race with memories of better days, the days when we were happy, when everything was perfect. I couldn't escape the questions, the endless loop of what if and why. I asked myself over and over what had gone wrong, but the answers never came. Maybe it was something I had missed. Maybe it was something I had done. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something that had been broken long before I knew it. I still couldn't shake the past. It clung to me, even in the most mundane moments. The smell of her perfume in the air, the sound of her voice, the way she used to laugh when I told a joke, it was all still there, like ghosts haunting every corner of my mind. I couldn't move forward. I couldn't move past the betrayal. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with Greg. It wasn't the images that haunted me the most. It was the feeling of being replaced, the thought that at some point I had stopped being enough for her. And yet, there was still a part of me that wanted to believe her, that wanted to believe that somehow, some way, we could have rebuilt what we once had. I think that part of me was the one that stayed in the marriage for so long, hoping that things would get better, hoping that the love we had shared would be enough to overcome everything. But love, I realized, is not always enough. Eventually, I came to terms with the fact that nothing would ever be the same again. I couldn't rebuild the past. I couldn't undo what had been done. But I could rebuild myself, and that's what I tried to do. I started with small things. I took up running again. I used to run every morning before life got in the way. It was something that had given me peace, something I could do for myself. It wasn't easy at first. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but there was something freeing about it. It was one of the few things I could do that didn't remind me of the life I had lost. I also reached out to old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. Maybe I was looking for some kind of validation, some sign that I wasn't completely lost. But the conversations were good. They were healing. I started to remember the person I used to be, the person before all of this happened. There was a part of me that felt selfish for needing this, for needing to pull away from Emma and Lauren, for needing space to heal. But the truth was, I had lost myself in the process of being everything for everyone else, and now I needed to find me again. Forgiveness was never easy. I always believed that love meant forgiving, but now I wasn't so sure. How do you forgive someone for tearing apart everything you've built? How do you look at them the same way when all you see is betrayal? I saw Lauren a few times after I left. We had to meet about Emma, to arrange schedules, to talk about how we were going to share custody. Each time I tried to stay calm, to keep my emotions in check, but it was impossible. The hurt was too deep, the betrayal too raw. I would look at her and the same pain would rush through me, a reminder of everything we had lost. But each time we spoke, there was something in her eyes, a deep regret, an apology that went beyond words. I knew she was sorry, but I also knew that no matter how many times she apologized, it couldn't change what had happened. It couldn't change the way I felt. Still, there were moments of clarity. I started to realize that I wasn't doing this just for her. I was doing this for me. The forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me. It was the only way to move forward, the only way to heal. A few months after I left, I started to find peace in the small things, the quiet moments that had once been lost in the noise of life, moments that had always been there, but that I had never fully appreciated. I spent more time with Emma, focusing on her, on being the kind of father she deserved. I realized that even though Lauren and I couldn't make it work, Emma was still the most important thing in my life. I began to see the world through her eyes again, the wonder, the joy, the innocence. It reminded me of the good things, of what I still had. I began to forgive myself, too, for the mistakes I had made, for the things I had missed. The past was over, and there was no going back. I couldn't undo the mistakes I had made, but I could learn from them. I could become a better person, a better father. Time passed, as time always does. Slowly, the pain lessened. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again. Lauren and I remained civil for Emma's sake, but we were no longer partners. We were no longer the people we once were. I had to accept that. One evening, as I sat in the apartment I now called home, I realized something. I had moved on, not in the sense that everything was fine, that I had forgotten, but in the sense that I had finally accepted the truth. Lauren was no longer part of my future. Emma was my future, and in that future, I was going to be okay. I still think about Lauren, of course. I think about what could have been. I think about the love we shared and how easily it all slipped away. But I also think about the lessons I learned, about trust, about love, about the fragility of everything we hold dear. And slowly, I am healing. Goodbye, Lauren. Goodbye to the life we once had. And goodbye to the man I once was. Tuhinyo.